We've all heard the term Africa is rising when we describe the continent's rapid economic growth and development. For centuries, women have been at the forefront of Africa's progress. But are the women of Africa really rising? Welcome to Our Voices. This is where African women bring the continent's most pressing issues to the table. We'll ask questions, share ideas, discuss solutions, and most importantly, we'll bring your voice, our voices, to the conversation. I'm Orion Itangishaka.
And I am Hadiza Kiari.
I'm Ayan Bior.
And I'm Haiti Adams-Fitzpatrick. You know, this is such an exciting moment for us. We're breaking new ground here at VOA, and we're bringing women's voices to the conversation. And more than that, we're building a community of inclusion and empowerment. We know you want to talk about the important issues of our time, and this is the place to do it. Your voice matters. Every voice matters. So join us in this conversation. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and WhatsApp, and we're going to respond directly to your posts and your messages. So let's raise the issues. Let's raise the roof. Together, we can start transformational conversations online, in our living rooms, and our communities.
We may be challenging some of the traditional ideas of women's role in society, and we welcome our brothers to help us build gender equality.
Above all, we are here to create a space for women to use their voices to talk about things that matter, not just to women, but to our communities and to the world at large. What we're starting here is a platform where all of our voices can be heard.
And you know, in recent weeks, as we've been preparing for the show, of course, we all know we've been having really inspired conversations about why the show matters. And it really makes me think about something you said, Ayen, about your family and your personal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this show really encompasses everything that I've worked really hard for. And I became a journalist because I wanted to amplify underrepresented voices, voices like my own mother's, who is a survivor of Sudan's civil war. I remember how much the war disrupted our lives and how strong my mom had to be to get us through it. I also remember the women whose voices were drowned out because of political instability. This show is an extension of their voices, and not just their voices, but anyone who's ever felt marginalized. I hope they feel like they can take part of our voices and that they're not just spectators to it. I often wondered, you know, what would it look like if we explored the continent from their perspectives? That's our voices for me.
That's right, Ayan. For me, I see our voices as a podium where women can actually connect and know that there's no reason for their voices to be a whisper. There's no reasons for them to remain in the shadow. Their voices matter. Their voices can be heard. You know, I know you mentioned something about your mother, and that definitely resonates with me because, like, growing up, I grew up seeing my mother. I watched her listen to Voice of America day and night. She literally slept and, you know, breathed Voice of America. And if I wanted any type of news, she would be my to-go person. You know, unfortunately, she's not here today. She passed away 2 years ago. And, you know, I mean, I only wish, like, what it would look like if she were here today to, you know, watch her daughter working for her favorite station.
Adiza, I'm so sorry, and my condolences. And I truly understand what you mean. VOA has also impacted me since I was a little kid, and I listened to it since, you know, growing up in Burundi. VOA was really made a mark in our lives as well, and that's why I'm really privileged and honored to be on this platform of very beautiful and intelligent African women, where we can come together and bring our perspective together about this great continent of Africa. And another thing that I think is important and that I'm privileged and excited about is that I'm on a panel with women that are coming from the different parts of Africa. You're from the East, you're from the West, I'm in Central Africa, you from the South. I'm excited, and I'm also excited to connect with our new viewers, our new families online and elsewhere, for us to really come together and see what we can do to move the continent forward.
You know, this also makes me think about what it was like growing up under apartheid and seeing the women in my family and my community. You know, they didn't have, they had a voice, but their voices did not matter. They couldn't vote, so they had no say in the decisions that affected their lives. They had very few choices in life, and so their options in life were really limited as well. And so I really hope this is going to be a platform for women like them. I hope that what we talk about here will be inclusive and accessible accessible to women across the continent, that we'll have news here and ideas that people can really use to effect change from villages and townships to boardrooms and the political arena. I know you've probably all had this question asked in a job interview: where do you see yourself 5 to 10 years from now?
For sure.
You know, I hope this show will really get a conversation started about the Africa we want to see 5 to 10 years from now.
That's right.
And the importance of getting women into that conversation and getting women to that table.
At
You know
that
that
table.
saying, if you don't fight for your place at the table, you'll sit on the floor.
That's right.
That's right.
You don't want to sit on the floor.
And so we also want to get you talking on social media. Catch us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and search for our handle at VOA Our Voices. We've got videos there for you and updates, and be sure to share our posts with your friends.
Also, don't forget to use the hashtag VOA Our Voices.
We're on WhatsApp too. Send us your messages, your videos. Our number is US country code +1 304 506 3638. So reach out to us and add your voice to our discussion.
When we come back, we'll talk about women in African politics. But first, we want to remind you that you are the fifth person on this panel, and it's time for your voices to be heard. Here's what some of you have to say about women in politics. We'll be right back.
It's very necessary to have women as leaders in my country and in my community, because women has a special power of solving issues, and they always love togetherness. We need to raise more awareness to make our women aware of how to be good leaders, because we want them to be the leaders of tomorrow.
They say that women are doctors in their houses. So if a woman can know how to take care of the family, she can know also take care of the country. And if a woman is the best economist in her family, she can be a best economist in her country.
I think that female politicians need to do more respect to supporting one another. We do not have so much support amongst ourselves, and there's so much more we could do together, being united. I would love to run for political office in my state by 2023, which is why I started my work now. So yes, I want to run for political office.
You're with Our Voices. Welcome back. Discrimination, violence, poverty, and harmful traditional beliefs about gender roles, all things that can limit a woman's role and rise in political life. Some overcome these obstacles, some don't. So what does it take to put women on the path to political power in Africa? And how can the lessons from the past shape our approach to the future? When Ethiopian lawmakers unanimously appointed the country's first female president, it turned a spotlight on Africa's short history with women heads of state. Right now, Sahle-Work Zewde is the continent's only woman at the very top. Looking back, 2014 was a bumper year. Africa had 3 women presidents at once. Malawi's Joyce Banda and Mauritius's Amina Gurib Fakim both appointed to the presidency. It was Ellen Johnson Sirleaf who smashed the political ceiling to become Africa's first and, till now, only elected female president. So why only one? Nigerian journalist Hannah Ojo says for women in some countries, the path to the presidency is littered with obstacles.
Even if you are credible, even if you have ideas, if you don't have money, you can't go into politics. Because if you're not stealing from somewhere or you don't have a godfather backing you up, you may not even be able to afford the nomination form because they won't give it to us. We can't always rely on appointments. We have to go out there, get to the political parties, get the nomination form, go to the campaigns and push ourselves out there.
Propelling more women to the presidency is one goal, but political analyst Emira Wood says it shouldn't be the only goal. She says gender equity is needed in judiciaries, cabinets and parliaments.
Women hold up half the sky and should be reflected 50-50 or more in these legislative bodies. So I think it is important for us to look at all of the political organs, not only the presidency, and understand that women's leadership has to continue to gain ground and to hold strong in all of those mechanisms of power.
Shortly after Ethiopia announced a 50% female cabinet, Rwanda followed suit. Women now make up half of its ministerial lineup and 61% of its parliament. Much of the success in Africa has been thanks to progressive laws that require political parties to nominate female candidates. Countries like Uganda, Kenya, Burundi, Senegal and South Africa have all adopted electoral gender quotas.
All the new constitutions throughout Africa have enshrined in them these quotas, these affirmative action clauses that are carving out a space at the local, at the state and national level, but also within the political party architecture for women political leaders to emerge. So there is a sense that, these are the values of the future, the values of the 21st century and beyond.
Woods credits generations of female activists who pushed for change and paved the way for today's women to dare shake up the status quo. So when I was researching the story, it really made me think about the path to power for women like Joyce Banda, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and what the rules of the game are. And so I want to know, what do you guys think? Are the rules and the pathways to power the same for women and men?
Absolutely not.
Yes,
No.
absolutely not. They are the same, and I will explain to you why. They are the same because I see it this way. They have to get to the top by either election, or they have to be appointed, or they have to do a coup d'etat. So either those three were to get to the top. But a lot of time you see women who are trying to get to the top, they're going through the grassroots route. They're trying to get the votes in their communities. They're trying to show their skills in getting the votes. And they rise up through that route. And sometimes they do plateau and get to a point where they can't pierce through. But a lot of times they help themselves through that route because they know that they have to go through that to get to the top by election.
But there are cultural limitations that women have to think about that men do not have to think about. And in 2006 in Darfur, they had peace negotiations there. And the women were not allowed in the room. So forget being at the negotiation table. They weren't allowed in the room to begin with.
There's your trouble.
Absolutely. But they did sit right outside the door. And finally, a man came out after hours of negotiations. And they asked him, what's going on? And he said, well, we're deadlocked because there's a particular river that we're debating over. And the women became visibly upset. They threw up their hands. They could not believe they were hearing this because they knew that that river had dried up years ago. Now, how do they know that? Well, because it's the women's job to fetch water.
That's right.
So, I think that culturally we prohibit women from pursuing politics when in fact the presence of women, the experiences of women can enhance politics.
I agree.
And you're right about that, Ayan, because in northern Nigeria there's a huge focus on marriage and childbearing. It is a culture that is not gender equality friendly. Having said that, I can tell you that Nigeria is a country that places a lot of emphasis on education. I mean, the average Nigerian is highly educated. However, for a woman to rise into power, she has to work twice, if not three times, as hard as her male counterpart. I mean, I was looking at some sort of survey in all the ministries, and the Ministry of Finance stood out for me because I noticed that a lot of the women that have been in power are highly educated, and it got me thinking. I mean, what is the reason? Is it because they're detail-oriented? Is it because they're less prone to corruption? Or is it because they're more sensitive to their reputation?
I don't think, though, that women are less prone to corruption or even nepotism. We've seen examples of that.
They're not. Corruption can be for men or for women. But I think also the important point of being educated is key to getting to the top also because, I mean, you see countries where even though they use the political route, they also realized that education was a stumbling block and they went back. Burundi and many places in East Africa, they went back even after having high position, went back to school and had to get their education.
And we had the same experience in South Africa. Because of apartheid, of course, many people did not have access to education. But it is possible for women, and it has been possible for women, to rise inside political parties, inside the ranks, and really excel without really an education. But I believe a lot of women were smart enough to recognize that they needed an education if they wanted to rise to the very top. So they went back and got those academic credentials that they needed. Although on the flip side, we did very recently have a guy, a president, Jacob Zuma, who rose to the very highest office in the land without a formal education. At the time, he was celebrated and hailed as a man of the people.
Oh, that's interesting. You know, another man of the people is Bobby Wine. Very similar experience. He was a musician, and he came to prominence, and he's now a politician. Also in Liberia, George Weah played football, and you know, he also came to prominence eventually, and now he's the president. But I often wondered, is there a double standard with women? If there was a woman who was a football player, an athlete, or a musician, could they rise to the same level that these two men have as well?
I doubt it.
I don't think so either.
They would not rise to
I don't think so either.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, Ayan, because that got me thinking. Sonia Kosi comes to mind. He was a popular singer turned pastor, and he tried to run for office in 2007. I mean, obviously he did not make it, but it's something that would get you thinking of, if he was a woman, would he have, you know, been as popular as he was?
The fact that he ran.
Yeah, I don't think a woman just being popular is enough.
Well, it does make me think, though, about the rules of the game, as I said earlier, and who writes those rules. We see in many, not just African countries, but around the globe, there are many political systems and structures that still largely favor men. And so that gets me thinking about, really, change should come from within those structures. We shouldn't just be seeing women at the very grassroots level of leadership or at the very top, but we need women at every step of the political hierarchy. It's great to be the Minister of Agriculture, it's great to be the Minister of Gender, or exactly, Arts and Culture and Tourism, but we need more women as the Minister of Trade and Investment. We need more ministers of Defense and Finance. That's when we can start changing policy, and if we change policy, we can change reality.
I agree, and I like the fact that you brought up structure. Structural change is very key, and that one solution I can offer is quota system. A quota system might help.
Yeah, but do quota systems work in every country, though?
Not every country.
Not every country. I wouldn't say a quota system will work, and obviously I wouldn't say that any system you bring to the continent, you cut and paste into any nation. It's 54 nations. It wouldn't work. But one example I'll give you is in 2005 in Burundi, when they had a peace accord after the civil war. They had a peace accord, and at that time it was only 1% in the parliament, 1% women in the parliament. At the peace accord, they said minimum 30% of women have to be at the table. Minimum, not just 30, but at least 30%. Since then, women have been empowered. They have been shown that they have a seat at the table and they can, you know, add their voices.
I mean, that's a good solution. I just don't see that working in a country like Nigeria for two reasons. Nigeria has what we call godfatherism and corruption.
Godfatherism, I like that.
Exactly, godfatherism. And I say that because this is a country where if you do not have a backup, if you don't have a godfather backing you up or the resources, your climb to power is going to be limited. And I also see another loophole is the fact that I don't see transparency in the system. I mean, are you going to compromise quality over quantity? And merit as well can be compromised.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Hadiza. I mean, I think it's important to look at the success stories in Africa, but I am more interested in where it hasn't worked. In Burkina Faso, for example, they have a 35% constitutionally mandated gender quota, but they've declined in women's participation in parliament. We should ask why.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a good question. This is a very contentious debate, and so, of course, we want to know what you think. Do you think that the rules of the game are different for women than they are for men? Is the path to power different than it is for men? You know where to find us on social media. We really want to hear from you. Quick lightning round, ladies. What we're seeing in Ethiopia, 50% female cabinet. First female president of the country, Africa's only female president at the moment. Do you think this is going to have a ripple effect across the continent?
You know, the Ethiopians are giving me so much life right now, and I have to say there are little girls watching what's going on in Ethiopia, and they're thinking, I could be president one day. So will there be an immediate effect? Maybe not, but generational, absolutely.
I agree, and I think there's something great happening in Ethiopia, something great to have a young 42-year-old president. He just appointed a female 42-year-old prime minister, a female president, and you know the cross-border relationship that have been in tension for 20 plus years. He's mending them, and so I think the continent can really be inspired.
I agree with both of you. I think Ethiopia is actually paving the way for a religious, ethnic, and gender-free society.
Look, I say way to go, Ethiopia, but the South African in me has to say that, it's when the honeymoon is over, that's when the real work starts. So all eyes are on Ethiopia, of course, and as I always say, African leaders, whatever we are doing on the continent, like you said, little girls and boys are watching.
And we're watching as well.
That's right.
Speaking of African women rising, after the break, we'll introduce you to a Somali immigrant making her mark in American politics, and we'll be asking you for your opinion on who the rising women are in politics. We'll be back in a moment.
Like Voice of America on Facebook. Follow VOA on Twitter. Join VOA on our YouTube channel. Like, follow, join VOA.
Welcome back. This is Our Voices, and we'd like to introduce you to Ilhan Omar. From a Somali refugee camp in Kenya, she's blazing a trail in U.S. politics. The 36-year-old's historic rise as the first Somali-American legislator in the United States is a beacon of hope for women, particularly Muslim women worldwide. Here's her story.
And now let's get to the business of dancing and celebrating. We're going to Washington.
In an historic victory, Ilhan Omar becomes the first Somali American elected to the United States Congress. She defeated Republican challenger Jennifer Zelensky in Minnesota's solidly Democratic 5th Congressional District. In an exclusive interview with VOA, Omar says voters in America have made their voices heard.
Throughout the country, people are choosing hope over fear and unity over division. And it's a really exciting opportunity in a time when Somalis are on the Muslim ban to be sending a Somali refugee to Congress. Minnesota is sending a clear message.
Ilhan Omar has come a long way since fleeing Somalia.
The little girl in that refugee camp 22 years ago, I don't think she could dream about this grand dream and plan.
A dream first realized as she claimed her seat in the Minnesota House of Representatives in 2017, taking the ceremonial oath of office on a commemorative Quran.
The ethos of America that can embrace a Somali American hijab-clad woman as their representative, I think that says something amazing about America.
Ilhan Omar's 2016 bid for a seat in the Minnesota House of Representatives in a liberal district in Minneapolis initially seemed like a long shot, says University of Minnesota political science professor Lawrence Jacobs.
From afar, Ilhan Omar had everything going against her. She was a Muslim in a state that's predominantly Christian. She's black in a state that is among the whitest states in the country. She was a woman where women are not well represented in the legislature. She was an immigrant in a state that doesn't have a lot of immigrants. Every one of those things could have been held up as a barrier, and yet she prevailed.
Today, there are about 25,000 Somali Americans in Minneapolis, many of them refugees like Omar.
Coming from a community that usually sees leadership as a man's role, that played a huge part in creating a lot of difficulties.
Another campaign hurdle was countering the increased rhetoric Muslim Americans faced during the national presidential election in 2016.
It sort of provides a counter-narrative to say all is not bad. If someone like Ilhan, who has all of the odds against her, can succeed, then, we are able to see that as a country we do have a balance.
As the first Somali American legislator in Minnesota state government, Omar has supported legislation investing in affordable housing and better labor standards, among other initiatives. She views her role in the national conversation about Muslim Americans as a positive one.
Hearing about young people who are running for elected office in Kenya and in Somalia because they were inspired by my race, I think messages like that truly put things into focus and sort of, I think, amplify the level and the magnitude of what we've been able to do here.
Muslims, immigrants who believe, who reflect on the story of Ilhan will now have someone who speaks about their experience in the capital. First refugee to be in the capital. I think this is a very remarkable history.
Ilhan Omar continues to chart her historic path forward in the 116th United States Congress. With VOA reporter Abdul Aziz Osman in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I'm Deirdre Murray McIntosh.
Ilhan Omar there, definitely a woman to keep an eye on. And everyday African women on the continent and in the diaspora are doing extraordinary things. And so we want to highlight their accomplishments and contributions in a segment we're calling Women to Watch. Meet Bogolo Kenowendo. She's Botswana's first female and youngest ever Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry. She's 31 and there's so much excitement about this youth activist right now. She also runs a mentorship program, Wolaya Khosi, which connects girls with Botswana's most successful women. And she says we can't talk about poverty without talking about gender equity.
Another woman fighting for equality is Mariam Loshi. Recently, Nigeria passed a Not Too Young to Run bill, which reduced the age requirement for elected offices, paving the way for youth inclusion. Mariam Loshi, along with others, pioneered the movement that made it happen. She's only 27, but she emerged as a public secretary for the newly formed Modern Democratic Party. And she says, I am ready for the status quo to change.
We're also keeping an eye on Sophia Abdi Noor. She's the first Kenyan woman of Somali background to be elected to parliament. She had the opportunity to contest for the seat set aside for a woman, but decided instead to leave that seat open to another woman as she campaigned against a handful of men. And when she won, she told reporters that she hopes little girls will be encouraged by her story.
I really like that she left the seat for another woman.
Yeah.
Also, a woman to watch is Doriane Munezero. At 28, she is the youngest in the cabinet of advisors to the president of Burundi. She was first appointed at 25 in 2015. In an open letter, she campaigned against the UN stigmatization of her political party's youth as a militia. She says, I am a woman who believes that true transformation of our societies will come through women, and politics is the only opportunity to be part of the decision-making process.
Who do you think deserves a shout out? Use the hashtag VOA Our Voices and tell us who you think is a woman to watch in African politics. It would be great to learn about the women you see rising.
Be sure to watch Our Voices on the VOA website where you can find the world's top news stories.
We leave you with a quote from the first woman to hold the office of president in Ethiopia, Sahle Work. She used her voice during her historic acceptance speech to say, I am a product of people who fought for equality and political freedom in this country, and I will work hard to serve them. If you thought I spoke a lot about women already, know that I am just getting started.
And that's where we'll leave things for today, on that very inspiring note. On behalf of myself and all my fantastic colleagues here, we thank you so very much for joining us. Until next time, it's goodbye.